There were times when the revelation he received ran contrary to what he preferred. It might declare his view to be wrong, or permit him something to which he was disinclined. Had he delayed acting on it for a short while, he would have been strongly reproached and criticized, even though it might have been a matter of little consequence. Several examples may be quoted here. Prophet, why do you impose on yourself a prohibition of something that God has made lawful to you, only to please your wives? Chapter 66, verse 1. You would hide within yourself something that God was sure to bring to light, fearing what people may think, whereas it is God alone whom you should fear. Chapter 33, verse 37. May God pardon you, Prophet. Why have you granted them permission to stay at home before you come to realize who was speaking the truth, and before you come to know the liars? Chapter 9, verse 43. It does not behove the Prophet and the believers to pray for the forgiveness of those who associated partners with God, even though they happened to be their near of kin, after it has been made clear to them that they are destined for hell. Chapter 9, verse 113. But to the one who considered himself self-sufficient, you were all attention, yet the fault would not be yours if he remained uncleansed. As to him who comes to you with zeal and with a feeling of fear in his heart, him you ignore and busy yourself with trifles. Chapter 80, verses 5 to 10. Let us reflect on these verses and the reproach they contain. Had they been the expression of Muhammad's remorse and feelings of guilt and sorrow when he realized his mistakes, would he have spoken about himself in such a strongly reproachful manner? Would he not have preferred to keep quiet in order to maintain respect for his own views and orders? Indeed, had the Qur'an been the product of his own conscience, he would have suppressed some parts of it when the need arose. And had he wished to suppress any part of it, then such verses would be the first to be so suppressed. But the Qur'an is God's own revelation, and Muhammad could not suppress any part of it. He does not begrudge others the secrets of what is unseen. Chapter 81, verse 24. Consider very carefully the following verses from Surah 8, the spoils of war, and you will find something very peculiar about the case to which they refer. It does not behove a prophet to take captives unless he has battled strenuously and shed blood on earth. You may desire the fleeting gains of this world, but God desires for you the life to come. God is almighty, wise. Had it not been for a decree from God that had already gone forth, there would indeed have befallen you a tremendous punishment on account of what you have taken. Enjoy, then, what you have gained as lawful and good, and remain conscious of God. God is indeed much forgiving, merciful. Chapter 8, verses 67 to 69. These verses were revealed only after the captives in the Battle of Badr were released and ransom was accepted from them. They start with a denunciation of this action as wrong, and conclude with approving it and consoling the Prophet and his companions. Indeed, this precedent, which earned reproach, became the rule to be applied in similar cases. Had this statement been made by Muhammad himself, is it conceivable that the psychological condition which produced its beginning could produce its conclusion without any period of time to intervene between the initial rebuke and remonstration and the ultimate approval? Certainly not. If we were to imagine that these two thoughts followed each other within any one person's soul, the latter would have cancelled the former altogether. The final thought would have approved what was actually done. What would be the reason, then, for describing the thought that was cancelled and erased and recording it in such a way that implied public rebuke? Why would the gain that was first described as lawful and good be shown first to be at least undesirable? What psychologists understand from this text is that there are two entirely separate beings, one of them a master saying to his servant, "You have done badly, but I pardon you and permit you to benefit by what you have done." If you examine these errors for which the Prophet is reproached, you are bound to conclude that they share a common denominator. When the Prophet had to choose between two options and found that neither involved anything prohibited, he would always choose what was more compassionate, more likely to win over his people to accept God's guidance, or to soften the hostility of his opponents. He would always choose the option that was less harsh and unlikely to raise doubts about divine faith. At no time with regard to these incidents did he have a clear text which he willfully disobeyed or forgetfully breached. All that he did was to consider and reflect, and when he felt that he had a choice, he chose the option closer to his kind heart. All that can be said in such cases is that he exercised his discretion and made a choice. Let us suppose that his choice was mistaken. Would he not in this case be justified, worthy of reward? The option he chose was the best that anyone endowed with human wisdom would have chosen. The Qur'an only draws his attention to what is better according to divine wisdom. Do we find in this any reasonable error that requires rebuke and reproach? Is it not a question of God speaking to his beloved servant and taking him up the road of finer education? Abdullah ibn Ubay, the leader of the hypocrites, died, and the Prophet gave his family his own robe to wrap him in for burial. He also wanted to perform the janazah prayer for him and pray for his forgiveness. Umar objected to this, saying to the Prophet, "Are you to pray for him when your Lord has forbidden you that?" The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "He has not forbidden me, but has given me a choice, saying, 'Pray that God may forgive them, or do not pray for their forgiveness. If you were to pray 70 times that they be forgiven, God will not forgive them.'" Chapter 9, verse 80. I will pray for him more than 70 times. And so he did. But God later revealed to him, "Never shall you pray over any one of them that has died, and never shall you stand by his grave." Chapter 9, verse 84. The Prophet then stopped praying for any of the hypocrites. Read this story, which is highly authentic, as it is related in the two Sahih, or authentic hadith anthologies, of Al-Bukhari and Muslim, and reflect on it. What does it reveal to you, other than a picture of a servant of God who has taken the Qur'an as a course of action, studying its text, to decide what steps to take? It also shows you a very kind-hearted person, who feels that the first verse gives him a choice between two options, and he immediately chooses the one that is full of kindness and grace. He does not resort to the other course of action until he receives a clear order. Whenever you study the Prophet's attitude in such cases or in others, you will find the two elements combined: complete submission to God and exceptional kindness that knows no limit. By contrast, the Qur'an gives the attitude that shows strength untampered by motives and purposes. It provides a clear verdict, one which distinguishes between truth and falsehood, whether people like it or not. It is the strength that remains unaffected by people's attitudes, whether they believe or not. It is neither increased by people's obedience, nor weakened by their disobedience. We can, thus, realize what gap lies between the two. It is certainly a great gulf that separates master and servant, worshipped and worshipper. Sometimes he, the Prophet, received a statement expressed in general terms, or an order that sounded highly problematic. Neither he nor his companions could find a clear interpretation of it until an explanation was given to him at a later time. Should we not ask here, what rational human being inspires himself with words that he himself does not understand, or gives himself an order without recognizing its purpose? Do we not find in this clear evidence that he is not the initiator, but simply the bearer of a message, and that he does not issue orders, but receives them?